T-minus 30. 20. 15.
Falcon 9 is configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff.
Vehicle pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal. Power and telemetry nominal.
For those of you just joining us, you are watching the Falcon 9 as it descends through the atmosphere, carrying the POTH satellite to a polar Sun-Synchronous Orbit. Right now, the rocket is approaching what we call max Q. This is the point at which the aerodynamic forces in the rocket are at the greatest. Falcon 9 actually throttles itself down as it passes through max Q and then throttles back up once we're through it.
Vehicle has reached maximum aerodynamic pressure.
We just passed through our maximum aerodynamic pressure, max Q. That Falcon 9 rocket is now throttling back up to full speed as it ascends through the atmosphere. As that first stage ascends higher and higher through the atmosphere, the ambient air pressure starts going further and further down, so you can see those exhaust gases getting bigger and bigger on your camera screen right now. In about 20 seconds, we're going to be passing through what we call MECO, which is main engine cutoff. That's when that first stage is going to complete its burn. Shortly after that, we'll have stage separation, and then second engine start, SES-1. Let's watch that happen now.
We have MECO.
You just saw it on your screen. That was a good MECO, main engine cutoff, a good separation of that first stage, and then what appears to be a successful second engine start 1. Stand by for fairing deploy. And you just saw it on your screen. That was a successful fairing deploy. You can see the fairing falling down below the second stage on your screen right now. SpaceX will be attempting to recover this fairing today. On your screen right now, you can see the Merlin Vacuum D engine nozzle. This is a radiatively cooled engine nozzle, meaning that it vents the heat from those hot exhaust gases by radiating that energy. And you can see it glowing red hot, burning that energy away. For those of you down in Southern California, you might get a good glimpse of those exhaust gases as the second stage accelerates. Looked like a nice clear morning today in Los Angeles. As the second stage ascends higher and higher into orbit, let's talk a little bit about exactly what orbit we're going to today. This is a low Earth orbit polar Sun-Synchronous Orbit. Low Earth orbit refers to the height of the orbit above the Earth, so things such as the International Space Station are also in low Earth orbit, but they orbit more along the equator, which is what's called a low inclination orbit. A polar orbit circles vertically about the Earth with respect to its poles, so that it passes over the north and the south poles. This is the orbit we're going to today. Certain types of polar orbits, like this one, a sun-synchronous orbit, keeps the orbit's plane directly in line with the sun. This allows any satellite that's in a sun-synchronous orbit to see all points of the Earth from exactly the same lighting conditions as illuminated by the sun. This is extremely useful for imaging applications, which would be the POTH spacecraft's primary intended purpose. Low Earth orbits only require a single burn, so we won't be having a coast phase or a second engine start 2. Like we would normally have for geosynchronous Earth orbit launches. For those of you just joining us, we did have a successful liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket at exactly 6:17 a.m. Pacific time from Space Launch Complex 4 in Vandenberg Air Force Base. Shortly after that, the first stage completed its job and separated from that second stage. We're currently watching the second stage as it continues its first burn, its only burn today, and accelerating that POTH spacecraft to a low Earth orbit. The next major event is going to be at about T plus 8 minutes and 58 seconds. That's when that second engine cutoff is going to happen, also known as SECO. Right now you can see the curvature of the Earth just behind that Merlin Vacuum D engine nozzle. All telemetry is still looking nominal from that second stage, getting good signal.
All right, there you have it. SpaceX up in space. Let's get straight to our space consultant, Bill Harwood, who is following the launch from Merritt Island, Florida. Bill, always great to have you to walk us through what we are seeing on our screens here. What is the significance of this launch?
Well, you know, this is a really busy year for SpaceX. As you know, they launched the big Falcon Heavy rocket 2 weeks ago, very exciting mission. But this is really getting back down to business. They've got a very heavy manifest. They've got a lot of satellites to launch. There's another flight next week, for example, out of Cape Canaveral. So this flight is as important as any other SpaceX flight, but this one has a little added sauce. They've got 2 broadband satellites on board. These are satellites designed by SpaceX that the company hopes to use eventually to make a global internet network so that you could get wireless internet anywhere in the world. It'll require several thousand of these satellites to make it work. This is the first flight to actually test these things. They're about the size of a small mini refrigerator. And like I said, they plan to launch thousands of them literally in the years ahead to give everybody wireless internet no matter where you are.
That is really cool. So the thing about SpaceX is that usually they recover their boosters, but they're not doing it this time around. Why not?
Well, that's right. This is an older booster. They've already launched it once, and so they don't have any plans to fly older boosters more than twice. So there's no reason to recover this one, and they're just letting it go. They do have a new version of this rocket coming online very shortly. Hang on just one second. I'm listening. They're about to shut down the second stage engine, which would mean a successful launch to this point any moment now. Still burning. You can always tell by the rig. Oh, there it goes. The engine is now shut down, so that's a good sign. The satellite, the major payload of this is a Spanish radar imaging satellite. That's going to be released in just a couple of minutes.
So, Bill, based on sort of the time and what you're seeing, where would this rocket be right now? I mean, has it sort of burst past the environment sort of surrounding Earth, or are we still?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
The spacecraft is in space. It is over the South Pacific Ocean. It took off from Vandenberg Air Force Base in Southern California, launched almost due south, not quite, but this radar satellite's bound for an orbit around the poles. And so it is in space. Once they shut down the second engine on a flight like this, second stage engine, they're there. So we'll release the satellite momentarily, and that'll be the conclusion of the mission.
So wait, how long does it typically take the rocket from takeoff to get into space? Because I feel like it was really only a few minutes.
It is. It takes usually about 8 minutes, somewhere along there. You know, when the Russians launch people to the space station, it's 8 minutes and 45 seconds from launch to orbit. This one's close, a little bit more than 8 minutes.
That's really impressive. You mentioned that SpaceX has been having a pretty good go of it lately. You know, things started off a little bit rocky, but it seems like they've sort of fine-tuned their process, and they've had really success after success lately.
Well, they have. You know, their launch pace is faster than any other rocket company going right now. They launched 18 Falcon 9s last year. This is their 4th flight so far this year. We're expecting more than 20 missions this year from SpaceX, which is a very ambitious flight rate, and it's something they've got to be very careful with. When you're launching that fast, you've still got to pay attention to the details, because you certainly don't want to lose one of these, because these payloads are very expensive. I don't know if you can see the picture right now. You're looking up at the satellites on the top of the second stage of the Falcon 9, and they're getting ready to release them into space to complete the launch phase of the mission. And there you can see it. That is the radar satellite is pulling away. And the 2 broadband satellites by SpaceX, you can see those still attached to the second stage. They'll be released in a few moments.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So overall, Bill, how successful has this Falcon 9 been?
Right now, this is going to bring an end to our webcast.
It's been very successful. They've had 2 failures so far, 1 in flight, 1 on the ground. But they've launched, this is their, what is this? This is their 50th launch of the Falcon 9, so they've had 2 failures in 50 flights. That's a pretty good record. It's not as good as the competition. United Launch Alliance has well over 100 flights with no failures, but they're Atlas and Delta rockets. But given SpaceX's launch pace, they'll be catching up pretty soon.
Hey, you mentioned United Launch Alliance. When I think of sort of the competition for SpaceX, I think of Blue Origin. But it certainly seems like SpaceX has been sort of pulling away from Blue Origin.
Well, you got to remember, Blue Origin hasn't launched an orbital rocket yet, not one. They've launched a suborbital rocket several times. That's one that just goes straight up, straight down. That's a separate operation. But SpaceX's competition for these big satellites is United Launch Alliance, the European Ariane rocket, and Russian Proton rockets. All of these are used to launch commercial payloads. But in the U.S., ULA, United Launch Alliance, is the competition. And they've got very reliable rockets. They cost a little more, but they've got a perfect record to this point. So you have to take that into account. Now, Blue Origin will be launching satellites to orbit, but they haven't gotten there yet.
All right, Blue Origin, of course, Jeff Bezos, Amazon,
Right.
you know, those two, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos seem to sort of go back and forth, a little bit of a personal competition.
Anywhere
between
where
the two.
where his car is right now?
Oh, yeah, right. Bill?
Yes.
Vlad was asking, do we know where the Falcon Heavy is and Elon Musk's car, his Tesla?
Well, the Heavy is history, but the car is out in space. As a matter of fact, just the other day, some astronomers took some video that shows this thing so far out, it's just a tiny little dot that you can see moving against the background stars.
Yeah,
it's really fascinating. I don't know how long they'll be able to see it. You know, it's not broadcasting any signals, but they got some big telescopes, and every now and then they take a look.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Hey, Bill Harwood, it's always great talking to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.